Welcome to Deep, Dark Depths, where we explore the most terrifying encounters that lurk within the shadows of our everyday lives. The air was biting cold as I stepped onto the familiar trail, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. Max was in high spirits, his tail wagging rhythmically as he explored the scents of the night, completely unaware of any danger. A heavy fog began to roll in from the north, swallowing the ground and twisting the trees into strange, skeletal shapes. The silence of the woods was heavy, broken only by the sound of our footsteps crunching on the dry, brittle leaves. Suddenly, Max froze mid-step, his ears standing at attention as he stared intently into the void between the ancient oak trees. I tugged gently on the leash, but he refused to move, his low growl vibrating through the leather strap in my hand. I shone my light directly where he was looking, but the beam revealed only empty air and the swaying of branches. A shiver ran down my spine, the primal instinct of being watched prickling the hair on the back of my neck. Max erupted into a frenzy of barks, lunging forward with a ferocity I had never seen in him before that moment. I managed to calm him down, but the peaceful atmosphere was shattered, and I decided it was time to head back home. We picked up our pace, walking briskly back the way we came, the darkness feeling heavier and more oppressive than before. Then I heard it clearly, the unmistakable snap of a twig breaking under the weight of a heavy footstep behind us. I spun around instantly, sweeping the light across the path, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. From above, we were just two small specks, lost in a sea of shadows, vulnerable to whatever was hiding in the dark. Max was no longer barking. Instead, he let out a low, pathetic whine, sensing a predator that I could not yet see. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a shadow darker than the night detaching itself from the trees. Panic took over my senses, and I broke into a run, dragging Max along as we raced towards the safety of town. The trees blurred into a tunnel of gray and black, the wind rushing past my ears masking the sound of any pursuer. I dared to look back one last time and saw a tall silhouette standing motionless on the trail, watching us flee. We burst through the tree line and onto the pavement, the orange glow of the streetlights offering a false sense of security. I collapsed under the nearest street lamp, gasping for air, my lungs burning from the cold and the sheer terror of the run. Max nudged my hand with his wet nose, his breathing heavy but steady, as if trying to tell me we were safe. But from the darkness of the woods, I felt a lingering gaze, a cold pair of eyes that had not stopped watching. I straightened up, pulling my coat tighter against the chill, and walked quickly towards the sanctuary of my own home. The neighborhood was asleep, the windows of every house dark and lifeless, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. Our footsteps echoed loudly on the concrete, a rhythmic sound that seemed to invite unwanted attention from the shadows. Paranoia gripped me tight, forcing me to glance over my shoulder every few seconds, expecting to see the figure again. My house finally came into view at the end of the block, the porch light a welcoming beacon in the night. My hands were shaking so badly that it took me 3 tries to fit the key into the lock's cylinder. We stumbled inside, and I immediately slammed the door shut, locking the deadbolt with a loud and satisfying click. I leaned back against the solid wood door, closing my eyes and letting out a long, shaky breath of relief. The living room was warm and quiet, a stark contrast to the cold, menacing atmosphere of the woods outside. Max, however, did not settle down. He paced restlessly around the room, sniffing at the air with suspicion. I walked into the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water, trying to wash away the dry taste of fear. I drank the water in one long gulp, the cool liquid helping to steady my nerves and slow my heart. My phone buzzed on the counter, making me jump, but it was only a meaningless notification from a social media app. I went to the living room to draw the curtains, intending to shut out the night, but I paused to look. Peering through the glass, I saw my own reflection staring back at me, ghostly and pale against the darkness outside. I scanned the yard, searching for anything out of place, assuring myself that my imagination was just playing tricks on me. Suddenly, The motion sensor light above the garage flooded the driveway with harsh, white light, startling me into silence. I held my breath, waiting for a monster to appear, but saw only a stray cat darting across the concrete. I let out a laugh at my own foolishness and reached for the curtain, but then my eyes caught movement. Across the street, standing perfectly still in the shadow of a neighbor's tree, was the figure from the woods. My blood turned to ice as I realized he hadn't just watched me leave. He had followed me home. He stood there like a statue, his face hidden in shadow, staring directly at me, exposed in the lighted window. Slowly, with deliberate movement, he raised a gloved hand and pointed a single finger directly at my front door. I yanked the curtains shut with trembling hands, stumbling back into the room, desperate to hide from that gaze. Max began to bark ferociously at the front door, his hackles raised, sensing the evil that was standing just outside. I rushed to the door to double-check the lock, my fingers fumbling over the cold metal of the deadbolt. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but my heart sank when I saw the words "no service" displayed. I ran to the landline in the kitchen, hoping for a dial tone, but was met with only dead silence. He had cut the lines. This wasn't a random encounter. This was a calculated attack, and I was the target. The lights overhead began to flicker ominously, buzzing like angry hornets before dimming and flaring back to life. I looked up just in time to see the bulb flare with blinding intensity before plunging the room into darkness. The house went pitch black, save for the thin slivers of moonlight that managed to creep through the heavy curtains. Then came the sound I dreaded most, heavy, deliberate footsteps creaking on the wooden boards of the front porch. I dropped to the floor, pulling Max close to my chest, praying that the intruder would think the house was empty. The doorknob rattled slowly, a metallic grinding sound that echoed through the silent hallway like a scream. When the door didn't open, he began to pound on it, heavy, rhythmic thuds that shook the very frame. I crawled on my hands and knees into the kitchen, my fingers searching blindly for a knife in the drawers. My hand closed around a cold handle, and I gripped the knife tightly, pointing it into the consuming darkness. Suddenly, the pounding stopped, leaving a silence that was heavy, thick, and infinitely more terrifying than the noise. I heard the footsteps moving again, crunching on the gravel, circling slowly around the side of the house. My heart stopped as I realized he was heading for the back patio, where only a flimsy glass door stood. I scrambled to my feet and rushed toward the back of the house, but I knew I was too late. A massive shadow loomed against the sheer curtains of the back door, blocking out the moonlight from the yard. A gloved hand pressed against the glass, sliding down slowly with a screeching sound that made my teeth ache. Max threw himself at the door, barking with a savage fury, ready to tear apart anything that came through. The figure didn't flinch. He just stood there, a dark void observing the chaos he had created within. I retreated into the hallway, backing into the shadows, trying to keep both entrances in my line of sight. The sound of shattering glass exploded from the bedroom down the hall, sending shards of fear through my veins. It was a distraction. While we focused on the back door, he had smashed his way through the side window. I heard the crunch of heavy boots on broken glass, followed by the soft thud of someone landing inside. I grabbed Max by the collar and dragged him into the bathroom, locking the door with trembling fingers. We huddled in the bathtub, listening to the slow, methodical footsteps making their way down the long hallway. The footsteps stopped right outside the door, and for a moment, the only sound was my own heartbeat. A shadow fell across the sliver of light under the door, confirming that the nightmare was standing right there. Then came a sound that froze my blood. A gentle, polite knock on the door, mocking my terror. Max let out a low, guttural growl, his body coiled like a spring, ready to defend us to the end. A deep, raspy voice whispered through the wood, saying words that I will never forget. "I know you are in there." The handle turned violently, the lock straining against the frame as he tried to force his way in. I raised the knife, my knuckles white, preparing to fight for my life the moment that door gave way. Suddenly, a beautiful sound pierced the night, the wail of police sirens approaching rapidly from down the street. The pressure on the door vanished instantly, followed by the sound of heavy boots running back down the hall. I heard the back door slam shut, the intruder fleeing into the night just as the blue lights flashed outside. I stayed frozen in the tub, too terrified to move, until I heard the amplified voice of the police outside. When I finally emerged, the house was full of officers, but the man in black was nowhere to be found. They never caught him. Somewhere out there in the deep woods, he is still watching, waiting for the lights to go out. Thank you for watching Deep Dark Depths. Sleep well tonight, and remember to always check your locks before the lights fade.